Welcome, John. How are you? If you're talking, you're on mute.
Hello. Sorry,
Hey,
I'm in transit here. Couldn't find the mute thing on my phone here.
no worries at all. No worries. Usually people take a few minutes to get here. I'm going to kickstart our call as well by just letting people know that we're started.
What's that?
I'm just going to send something in Slack. I guess I could put the link in the chat. That doesn't hurt anything. And where are you in transit from, if you don't mind me
Oh, I just
asking?
had an errand to run here.
Oh,
So
right on. Right on.
yeah, no, I'm here in Seattle and just doing a quick errand. I don't know if I'll be able to stay on very long. Like, my daughter's home sick and needed to grab something for my for my wife for dinner.
Ah, well, sorry to hear about your daughter being sick, but certainly understand it does happen.
Yeah, she came home early today. Apparently, big cold going around.
That's unfortunate.
Where are you based?
I am in British Columbia, so I'm in an area called the Sunshine Coast, which is across the water
Yeah,
from Vancouver Island.
yep. I've biked through the Sunshine Coast.
A lot of people do. It's murderous those hills. I'm surprised you dive in.
Yeah. So which town are you in then, or are
So
you near?
if you know where Sea Shelt is, keep driving for
Uh-huh.
about 40 minutes, or I guess bike riding would be a little bit longer. But I'm just past Madeira Park in an area called Garden Bay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really nice there. Yeah, Andrew, how are you?
Hello, hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Yeah, pretty well. Just arrived recently after work hours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why we schedule it for this time, at least for the
Yeah.
Pacific time zone folks. Um, how far is your commute, Andre?
Around 30 minutes to the
Okay.
office. Yes, pretty close to me, and I like work in the office,
Yeah.
some lunch talks and etc. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I I used to have a commute that would take 30 minutes if it was a good day, but it could take as much as like an hour and a half if it was a bad day. Those were
Yeah, yeah,
those were
yeah,
relentless, and there was no mass transit that wasn't really an option to get to
yeah.
that. But that's the way it
When I
works sometimes.
when I worked into Australia, I need to commute in one way around 1 hour.
Oof, yeah,
1 hour, yeah, and I can sleep, I can work, I can read during this 1 hour.
yeah. If your own mass transit, a long commute isn't nearly as bad because you can do other things. But if you have to drive the whole time, that just gets
Yeah,
painful.
yeah, definitely, it's not good enough.
Yeah. So how you been?
Are you asking?
Yeah.
Me or
Yeah.
me, I thought maybe. Yeah, all good, you know. Uh, are you living in I forgot. This is Victoria, yeah? I living in Victoria?
No, I'm just on the other side of the water on Sunshine Coast. So if
Okay,
you
because
if you went to Horseshoe Bay, you would go to Langdale, that
ah,
that ferry.
okay, I got it. Yeah, because last weekend I was into Nanaimo, and
Mhm.
I remember you mentioned something you are living in Vancouver Island, yeah, and
Yeah, we lived there for a year. So we lived in the lower part of the island around Duncan, that sort of area, which was really nice. Real quick to get to Victoria, which was maybe 30 minutes to an hour away. Then we moved up towards Nanaimo, and then we moved to Courtney for our last spot. So we lived in a few different places on the island, got to see a good
ah,
part of it. We got all the way almost to the top of the island before the
ah.
roads kind of run out.
You have a big experience here living in an island.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to determine if that's where we wanted to settle down. So we gave it a year to see how it would work
Mm,
out. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, it's really nice there. The only problem I had with the island was a lot of places don't really have strong internet access or cell phone signal, and
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't want to rely on Starlink.
You, all time you just sit down on Starlink? Do you
Well,
use Starlink?
well, no. Thankfully, we were in places that had okay internet. It just wasn't really great.
Uh,
So long term, it wasn't a really good solution. Short term, we could just tell people, hey, the internet's not great. Maybe in 4 months it will get better when we move to the next place.
mm. Oh, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned this problem, and me and my son and I, we use the same provider. I forgot name, Fees or something like this, and it's like a 5G internet. And I
Nice.
noticed on my old phone, I use this is Samsung S10, you know, this is granny phone,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
kind. And my son has something modern one, and you know, I noticed, for example, I have like a 5 or 4G, but in some area, but he barely have like a 3G in that
yeah,
area. And the same coverage, the same provider, but yeah, different signal.
yeah. And a lot of cell phone maps aren't really granular enough to give you an expectation if you're right near a border, which a lot of these towns are right on a borderline of good reception.
Yeah.
But I see Chris Kelly just joined. How are you?
Real good, thanks.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for joining us. I think we'll get started in a little bit. We usually take a few minutes just to give folks time to catch up and join in and get through whatever they got to get through. But if anybody's not aware, our topic today is Drupal hosting. We had a few topics that we were debating in our Slack channel. So if you aren't on there, definitely join the Slack channel. Um, but some of the folks that we wanted to have on for one of the topics couldn't make it, and well, it would be fair not to try. But Drupal hosting should be a good topic. I know there are a few questions that I lined up to see what people's thoughts are. So, Chris, what do you do?
I'm a Drupal developer. I contributed some modules and a little bit of core for Drupal 11.
Right on, right
And
on.
I'm working on a change to the permission system to make it a little more user friendly.
Yeah, that permission system, especially when you have lots of roles, can be quite the cumbersome set of checkboxes. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is to provide extra help and to categorize it so it's easier for you know people to use.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, right now my wife is making spaghetti for dinner,
Ah,
and we're
smell tasty, yeah.
oh yeah, lots of onions, lots of garlic. But also watching the Oilers playing the Panthers, which should be a really, really interesting Stanley Cup series. But yeah, I think there were a handful of our regulars that might not be able to make it to our meetup today, just due to other obligations or whatnot, which I think brings up a really important topic: the summer, when a lot of people are away and doing things. So what I think I might do with the meetups, I still have plans on having them. Obviously, if people can come, that's great. If they can't, that's fine. What I'll probably do is linger around for maybe half an hour, see if anybody shows up. No one does, I'll just cancel it. But just wanted to let you know what to expect there.
Okay. But yeah, you can count on me. I'm going to be
Yeah.
here.
Well, it helps keep our Drupal community healthy to have a place for folks to go and something that's accessible. Some other kind of housekeeping things. Every time I do try to make notes of who attends these because I do want to give credit on Drupal.org for folks. So if I don't have your Drupal.org username, go ahead and pop it in the chat or put it in Slack or send it to me in a private message, and I'll make sure to give you credit. I'll do my best to look you up if I can, but it does help shorten my workload there. Another housekeeping thing, if you didn't notice, we are switching from meetup.com, which technically costs money, and we weren't going to spend money on doing that for this. So we were piggybacking off of the Portland group, which was confusing people because this is a virtual meetup and it doesn't really have a geographic presence other than being kind of more time zone focused. So I switched over to a free platform called Luma. So there's a calendar for that. If you're not subscribed, definitely subscribe to it because then you'll get notifications about upcoming meetups and whatnot. And you can put it on your calendar if you want.
Yeah, I finally registered today on this platform because before I just used this direct link.
Yeah. And the direct link will continue to work. If we had 100 or more people trying to sign up, then registrations become a little bit more important and I'd have to look at it. But so far we've had like maybe a dozen or more folks showing up at the most. So not really a big deal so far.
Have you checked out the member platform initiative?
I haven't.
Membership
No.
platform.
What is that?
It's something that is there's I can't think of the guy's name that's running it, but trying to put together a Drupal, basically a Drupal CMS like distribution for small user groups just like this that basically has easy membership. It's not meant to have any commerce or anything, but they're looking for groups that would be interested in using it as a test drive type of thing.
Yeah, I guess then it's a matter of where do we host it. So I'm always just keeping an eye on where does the funding for that go. If there is an existing host that I can leverage, then that might make sense. But I do want to make sure that the group is thought of as owned by the community and not by someone like myself. So whatever it is needs to be accessible by a few of our organizers here. So I'd like to learn more about that, though. I think that's a good idea. And if somebody in our group has access to free hosting that we could use, that might be something to consider.
We run our own hosting. We have clients that use Pantheon, but we also manage a bunch of servers for clients, and then we host some of our smaller clients on our servers. So I'd be happy to provide hosting if it was okay for the group.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Maybe that can be kind of a thing that we do in one of the meetups is chip away at setting something up and whatnot. So if the group is interested, but for now I'm going for as little work, effort, and expense as possible, trying to manage things with a few folks. So I think making do with that. I think really where I could use the most help is just getting the word out about this group existing and when the meetups actually occur, so folks can join our Slack channel and our Luma platform to be aware of when they happen. So if you know anybody that would be interested in joining, just let them know and have them subscribe and join our Slack channel.
Okay, good. I
Uh,
see Chris published his profile, tolstoy.com.
yeah, yeah.
Chris, did you read Tolstoy's book?
Yeah, yeah, but yeah,
Something famous one or like not so famous?
not so famous ones.
I've read Anna Karenina.
Yeah, it's the famous one. Yeah, we we study. This is Anna Karenina and how it
War and
translate to
Peace.
English? War and Peace. Yeah, War and Peace. Oh, it was so so hard to learn and to study. We studied in a school. It was like a grade 11 and grade 12 at four. It's completely crazy. Yeah.
Wow, that's almost like university level sort of
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. You know, and for that time, for me, I read this book, and for me, it was so boring. You know, this is it's because it's for all. You need some kind life experience to understand this is book. And after
yeah,
I read War and Peace after I graduate university. I think it was I 24, 25, 24 years old when I was, yeah. And for that time it was another experience and I like this book, yeah.
yeah. Once you have a deeper understanding of geopolitical
Yeah, yeah.
complexities.
And yeah, it's like a social experience you need as well, yeah, for this book.
Yeah,
Because when you're younger, I think it's not younger, for this grade 11, you still child, and they try to push this is like some kind love, feeling, social behavior, and you think, oh, it's so boring. Can they just go?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Well, yeah, that's a interesting kind of spin on thing, but good catch on the username. I would not have noticed that.
Yeah, just not notice.
I think there's one more thing that I wanted to mention that wasn't our primary topic, and that is the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit is currently being planned. We haven't really done a lot of promotion yet for it, but that's about to get underway. But if you weren't aware, that's going to be taking place in Portland this year,
Mhm.
and it's going to be like actually slightly outside of the city of Portland. So anybody that's interested in submitting sessions, that should be opening soon if it's not open already. So definitely check that out. Looks like a really good spot that they've picked for the summit. It's kind of like a old, um, not an asylum. I'm trying not to call it an asylum, but kind of like a health retreat sort of slash hotel sort of looking thing. So not a university. So
Uh-huh.
that should be an interesting kind of location. So if you haven't been to the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, looks like a good one this year, and I think next year will be in Vancouver.
Oh, I thought I just had a look to the map and I thought it's pretty close to Vancouver, but I see in the USA we have separate Vancouver. Portland and on the map I see another Vancouver and I was
Yep.
confused.
Yeah, it's the history of the area, like the line between Canada and the United States was very different when that existed.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, I think we can jump into our main topic. So Drupal hosting. I had a few questions written down, and I'm kind of curious everyone's thoughts about Drupal hosting. But um, obviously, there's a lot of different types of hosts. Like there's managed hosts, but there's also unmanaged hosts. Um, are there other types of hosts? Is there more nuance to it that we really want to kind of talk about?
I can share my experience, not only mine, but what we are using for the project, if it's interesting for our group. Yeah. Uh, Currently, we are using all this is Acquia hosting, Acquia Cloud. A couple our project we use just vanilla Acquia Cloud, and another couple project use this is Acquia Site Factory.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and as you know, all Acquia Cloud it's based on a top like a lower layer. It's still AWS, Amazon Web Services. Yeah, and we're using this hosting. It's a pretty expensive one, and be honestly, I don't like in this hosting. Uh, Before I had a good experience with previous Next. They support us and they also have like a use AWS as a, like a low level and yeah, pretty nice. And I noticed in the hosting modern day all company use basically some kind global AWS or maybe Patreon hosting or something similar like this one, but they built another layer and what's good for hosting at least for me it's support. For example, if you have some kind question, you just write this question or call and it's how quickly you can this is support. For example, for the Acquia, I don't like the support. It's all time. It's pretty. Sometimes it's quickly, but you know it's looks like it's the answer just generate through Chat GPT and send me back. You know, it's
Yeah.
I don't like this approach. Because usually, for example, if you work in the with the Drupal long time, you try to avoid bother people with some kind stupid and dummy questions. You try to research yourself, and after, if you struggle and you don't understand what direction for your digging, you can send this is request. You just send this is request like I don't know half a page with explanation, some nice pictures, etc. And in the back you just some kind generated GPT answer and it is and yeah it's frustrate me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's what my experience.
Yeah. And there's a whole lot of nuance, I think. Like, for example, and I think there's some practicality to this. There's cloud hosting, like your Acquias, your Pantheons, your platform.sh, which I think most Drupal developers that have been around long enough have worked with those three at some point, especially if you've worked with an agency. But if you've worked directly for like government departments or small businesses, you're definitely going to run into things like in-house servers, like self-hosting, or
Mhm.
people who have their own data center access that have things beyond just websites, perhaps, but may have a rack in a data center where they put things. And I think we all know the pros and cons of self-hosting. But if you're trying to be compliant with certain standards, sometimes those are the things that, especially when it comes to things like government or even large scale enterprise, are oftentimes a consideration. There's cloud hosting as well. So I think then you break into the like, well, is it managed hosting or is it just you're left to your own devices, or maybe it has um, pre-installed things that you can deploy based on what they have in their own toolkit. Like, here's a Drupal instance, I'm just spinning it up. Um, I think that's been my experience, but any other experience in terms of like the types of hosts or the hosts themselves?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we manage a lot of servers for hosting Drupal sites, and we're big advocates of self-hosting. We definitely work with Pantheon and Acquia and with some clients that have those all set up. But yeah, I think that your breakdown there, either hosting at a virtual server level is what we tend to do, as opposed to a managed hosting, shared hosting account that you could get that's like the really minimal, cheap hosting, which has its own share of problems.
Oh, for sure. I've definitely seen some people go as cheap as possible and very quickly learn either from a performance or a security, or even
Mm.
just like oh shoot, the site went down. Now who do we call? And it's like, no, it's you. You wanted this. You own this. It was set up by someone either in your company or by an agency. And now that you're no longer working with them, it's your responsibility. You have the keys to the castle.
Yeah.
And I think there's compliance considerations too. I know in the United States, for example, you have things like FedRAMP, and not all hosts support things like FedRAMP. There's a lot to that.
What is this FedRAMP?
So they're security standards in
Mm.
terms of the hosting environment, how data is handled, just security procedures at data centers themselves that have to be FedRAMP certified. So if for example, I'm a private contractor or I work for an agency and I'm bidding on something for the government in the United States,
Mhm.
if I don't have a FedRAMP server to put it on, I'm not doing work with that with that institution or that department
Mm.
uh, because you won't qualify.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that other countries have very similar things. I know Canada does as well. I was just talking to my local MP specifically about that, and he was like, "Yeah, it's very much a thing in Canadian government." Um,
Well, and just there's the others too, like PCI compliance. If you're going to
yeah,
take credit cards,
or
HIPAA
HIPAA.
if you're
Yeah,
dealing with with privacy records and all that. Um,
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, privacy records is another issue and another problem.
GDPR, CCPA. Yeah, and I think beyond security, privacy, performance, there's also the perspective of the layering of things. Like you can go right into the raw server itself and manage everything yourself, and that's its own investment. You could work with AWS or Azure and have things like deployment tools, backup systems, and things that you implement yourself. But again, that's
Mhm.
not really managed. Or you could work with a provider that does some of that for you. And it's just these extra layers that go on top, and what that actually means. And I think a lot of people who want a website or have a website don't really see the nuance of all of those things until they see what it does for them, especially when you're at the enterprise level. Small to medium sized businesses, probably not so much. Um, but it's the cost of setting it up, maintaining it, upgrading it, dealing with outages, dealing with backups and restoration. And then, of
Mhm.
course, when you get to like the level of Acquia and the like, you have all these extras and tools like Site Factory, Site Studio, and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. For
Yeah.
the for example, enterprise level and I think yeah for the government deploy first of all it's like a how its process start. You push to repo something, start make PR, approve PR start deploying to separate OD like on demand environment, and after you can merge. Just exchange your product environment this with this another environment, and this is still like a part of hosting. So this is environment and this is process for CI and CD. It's still part of the hosting. But yeah, it's not. I think yeah, it's not for only for biggest one because
Mhm.
I remember back days when I work in Ukraine, in Moldova. We use similar, but it was as Chad mentioned, they have our own server because we're pretty poor country, and yeah, all things, all hosting was on our servers. But we use GitHub and GitHub CI, CD, and even we didn't use this is a runner, a GitHub running. We also deploy our runner, and GitHub just trigger our runner, and we just use Jenkins and all this stuff around. Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's Jenkins or something like GitLab or just GitHub or Kubernetes or like whatever layer of tooling that you need to be able to maintain the server and do your deployments, I think that's something that folks who are involved at that, let's just call it the DevOps layer, which arguably really leaches into IT in one direction or development in another direction. Just understanding how that impacts when you need to make a change, what that looks like, or when you need to do disaster recovery, what that looks like. Like these are different levels of investment of time to deal with any of those sort of things. Also, a different level of fidelity. So you may have deployments that do linting and do other sort of like things like testing, regression testing, or whatnot before as a deployment goes out to really build an environment. And this is especially pronounced when you have multi-site, or like if you had a university with lots of departments, lots of sites, and you're doing deployments across multiple properties, you really start to see the necessity of high fidelity scaling of a lot of those tools. If I'm a smaller business, maybe I have a few yoga studios or something like that, these aren't really the concern that I have. Or if I'm even in elementary school, I probably don't really have those sort of concerns. But once you start getting towards that enterprise level, like a university or a hospital, those start to really become very pronounced in terms of what your requirements are. And I think we talk about, the different levels of hosts like AWS or platform. But then you also have, let's kind of talk a little bit about the cheaper ones. Like if I am a yoga studio, but I still want a Drupal site, but I'm okay with working with somebody that kind of knows what they're doing, I might look at like a DigitalOcean or a Linode or something like that. Do you folks have experience with those types of solutions or recommendations?
Yeah, we're kind of host agnostic at that level, and we are doing exactly that. We're spinning up. We have our own CI/CD systems. We have our own infrastructure for monitoring and all that. But the actual hosting, we generally have our clients that are big enough to need a dedicated host. We'll have them go sign up for DigitalOcean or Linode or whatever, and then we'll deploy our normal hosting stack on a server in their account and just run it all for them.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed a few companies will do that, especially companies or single person shops who just have all the tooling ready to go to be able to manage things on their own. But they might be working with clients that can't afford the Acquia stack, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of the cost of doing business at times. If you don't need those larger enterprise tools because your website really isn't that complex, or you just don't have the budget for it, that has to be a part of the conversation. I know there are a few folks who worked with Acquia who would be the first to tell you Acquia is not cheap. It is definitely not for the small to medium sized business. They are more focused on enterprise level, which doesn't mean that you need Acquia to be enterprise level. You can get away with an enterprise level solution with something else. I mean, even self-hosting to that degree. But it's just a matter of like, where do you want to spend your money for somebody to do something that you don't want to do in-house, or pay a vendor to do themselves, which might be more or less proprietary.
Yeah. I think another reason it's about responsibility. Tara, hello. How are you?
Hi, Terry.
I'm okay. I'm glad there's a little bit of reprieve in the weather, but still been really rainy up here in Alaska.
Oh, for sure. Did you get the Northern Lights? I guess you always have the Northern Lights.
Well, I couldn't really see them because of the rain.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
creates a massive like fog that you can't really see anything.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're deeply underway in our discussion about Drupal hosting. Um, we started listing a few hosts, talking about tooling, deployment workflows, things of that like. Tara, what's your experience been with hosting, whether it's for Drupal or not?
Um, I've done a little. I did a little with Pantheon when I took the Drupal Easy class like a few couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I think it was. We did a little bit with Pantheon in that class, and then um, but the my previous job working for Alaska Vocational Technical Education Center, we actually had our own hosting,
Mm.
so that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I mean, there are different types of hosts. There's you can host everything on your own server sitting right beside your desk. And I think we've all probably, if you've been in the industry long enough, you've probably done that.
Yeah.
It's not advisable, especially if you have like fire or flooding concerns, or you just have any sort of good business sense. But then there's also, hey, we're going to the data center to visit our rack. Definitely had those sort of moments where that's where the server lives. But there's a level of, I think, investment to maintaining a lot of those things. I think it's important to recognize that experience, though. We talked a little bit too, not too deeply about workflows and tools that come with certain hosts. Like let's use Site Factory as kind of our example here. I bring that up not to necessarily go through a huge list of host provided tools because there's a value add to some of those things. It's solving a problem that is common enough to warrant a tool. But I think there's a flip side to that. If I am hosting with Acquia and maybe I just get a bad taste in my mouth, I don't want to host with Acquia anymore. Maybe I want to move from Acquia to platform.sh. Well, that's a very large undertaking, especially if you have a lot of vendor lock in, as they call it, where you're using proprietary tools like Site Factory. And if you want to leave from Acquia, you have to basically peel off the nerves and the veins and whatnot
Yeah. Yeah.
away from that tool to put this website in a different place.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's enough to keep somebody locked in to something like Acquia until they're ready to do a major upgrade. Um, have have you experienced that? Have you gone through that with your clients before?
Yeah. Uh, I had this experience, and for this, when you need to move from one platform to another one, first of all, you can spend months and months just for cover testing, test all your website and etc. Because usually, uh, yeah, you don't have time for cover for right testing, proper testing, user testing, functional testing, and yeah, finally,
Well,
when business decided to move to something more modern or less expensive, and you start writing, it's like a time for write tests. Yeah, especially first of all, it's especially a user interface test. Yeah, and first of all, it's testing, and after you can. mm, Yeah, I have only one. This is experience when we moved from Acquia Site Factory to. I forgot. This is Patreon. Yeah, I hope it was Patreon, and we moved pretty quickly. We spent. It was not so big websites. We just spent around 2 weeks. Just move to these sites, but the another problem was these websites use REST API, and they was like a headless, and they had a connection to the mobile application, and it was some kind complicated a little bit. Yeah.
it,
However, yeah, it was successful. It was my first experience for that time.
it's a huge undertaking to kind of rewire a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And I can understand the reluctance, or even how a team might be so married to a solution that when they move to a new solution, they're always comparing the new solution to the old solution
Yeah, yeah,
for sake of
definitely.
familiarity and what it did
Yeah.
or didn't do. Um, so I guess migration is, of course, one key concern. But in terms of sometimes people don't want to use Drupal anymore and may want to switch over to WordPress or whatnot, and being on a host, staying on a host, but switching to a different platform can be a thing. So, for example, if you're with Acquia, it's just Drupal. But if you're with
Yeah.
Pantheon, they do more than just Drupal, and I think that's a thing. Or if you have multiple websites, sometimes you're hosting it on the same in the same host. But maybe you have a WordPress site for this and a Drupal site for that, or maybe some sort of open source LMS or something along those lines. Um, and I think that can be a bit of a discussion in terms of, again, if you have 5 different hosts that you have to call whenever something goes wrong when things are integrated, that can be a pain from a management standpoint. So there's a value proposition, I think, sometimes for having things on a single host.
Yeah. And I think another reason why, for example, people prefer some kind expensive hosting like Acquia or similar, it because about responsible. You pay money, and for example, if you have some kind of DDoS attack or some, I don't know, penetration problem, yeah, it's not your problem. You just give up. Okay, I pay money, please. Make something.
Yeah, some of these hosts actually have a lot of security and performance applications that are already at your disposal, may come with your subscription. So you can monitor those things. People might get notifications if something happens. So those alert systems, if you're doing that on your own, can be a major pain just to set
Yeah,
all that up or even be aware that you should set those up.
yeah, yeah. It's because I remember first time when I faced this is DDoS attack. It was, I think, yeah, 6 maybe 7 years back, and I didn't recognize that it was a DDoS attack. I didn't understand because yeah, for that time we have like a small site, and this is DDoS attack was not on directly on our site, just whole subnet, and we was in
Yeah.
that subnet, yeah, and yeah,
Well,
and
I, well, I think you bring up another good point, especially when you're talking about smaller budgets, is shared hosting versus dedicated hosting is a big part of the conversation.
yeah,
And also, as you scale up, having load balancers and things like that, and things that can automatically spin up either cold servers or already warm servers. That's not something that smaller businesses typically will talk about because they're just simply out of reach budgetarily. But if you have millions of visitors a day, then it really has to be a part of the conversation for the sake of stability. Or if you have some special event where you see traffic spikes, again, that has to be a part of the plan. And I think enterprise technical folks are aware of that and can navigate that and know what sort of hosts they would look at, know what's in their technical stack, whether it's a CDN or other services like a DAM, digital asset management system. Um, I I think that's where smaller businesses can have that ignorance. They can afford it. Enterprise businesses can't afford that ignorance.
yeah, definitely.
So I want to take maybe a different spin as well, just because it's enough in our face, and I think it's important as individuals for us to also talk about this. Is the ethical and the morality side of things, or the controversial side of things, in terms of hosts. So, for example, um, No Host for Hate is an initiative that really focused on some of the concerns that the community had with Pantheon for hosting the Heritage Foundation um, website. and that I think is an ongoing concern. So I think if I am, let's say, for example, uh, uh, I have a website that is trying to help women who are abused, or um, people who have gone through conversion therapy or something like that, then I'm highly sensitive to the impact that anti trans legislation would have. And I might think twice about hosting my website with Pantheon. So if there's a level of sensitivity either from a personal, ethical standpoint or from a business ethical standpoint, I think that has to be as much of a part of the conversation. When you scale up to a lot of these larger businesses, you take a look at Microsoft, for example. So we're kind of pivoting away from hosting in this for just a temporary moment. Microsoft and other large scale companies have defense contracts, and that may also kind of rub some businesses the wrong way, but they're still utilizing Microsoft technology because maybe there's not an alternative. So I think navigating that space needs to be a conscious decision, but I bring that up because I really think it has to be a part of the conversation when it comes to, if there are enough choices, then how does that weigh in? So I just said a whole lot. What are your thoughts?
Or you could just make arguments against things you don't like rather than trying to silence them.
Yeah. Can you elaborate?
Well, it's if there's speech you don't like, the answer is more speech.
So is this the
I mean, you might want to look into uh, Nadine Strassel from the ACLU. She's written a book or two about free speech. So, there are really censorship is a very dangerous thing.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Yeah, and I think censorship is one of those things that I want to try to pick my words now because I don't want to be misunderstood. Censorship is one of those things where I think, like voting, you can vote for A, you can vote for B, or you can not vote at all. But all three are choices. Not voting is a choice. So in the case of censorship, there are certain things that as a society, for example, yelling fire in a crowded theater, can you do it? You absolutely can. Is there a penalty for doing it? Yes, there is. So without going too deep into the direction of should you use a host like Pantheon, I think it's more an acknowledgement of, if I'm a business, is that something that I'm going to consider along with price and features and vendor lock-in and all those sort of things. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring that up.
Well, I think it being open source does give some flexibility there where you can entirely self-host it, or there's I'm in a DevOps group here because that is something we're heavily involved with, and there's a woman that is trying to start up a data center for hosting organizations that might be at risk for one reason or another, and so yeah, so you can choose places like that to host, and with an entirely open source stack, you're free to do that very easily.
So what's the name of, if you're able to say, what's the name of her organization?
I don't remember, and she's not live yet.
Okay.
I was definitely like asking her, is, hey, could we might like to host some stuff with you, and she never even responded. So I don't know. I don't think she's like ready yet. But just knowing that there are options out there, because we don't do any of the hardware around hosting. We that that's beyond the level of attention that I want to handle. We'll handle
Yeah.
the operating system on up. But so what are our options for hosting? Well, it's AWS is a huge company, Google, DigitalOcean, Linode. Those are a lot smaller and a lot, I a lot better aligned, but they're still venture-backed companies that are making wealthy people wealthier.
Yeah.
So I'd like to find some alternatives myself.
I think you're hitting kind of the thing that I'm trying to bring up really well, which is our jobs, and all of us have slightly different jobs, but our jobs oftentimes is to make recommendations for either the business that we work for or clients. And we want to be sensitive to their needs and their values. So I think if a lot of Drupal developers are quick to the ball to say, oh, you should go with Acquia or Pantheon or Platform SH because that's the most familiar to them, you don't really have a big toolkit to pick from. But the bigger our toolkit is in terms of understanding what's available for Drupal hosting and what's appropriate for any given website, and again, their sensitivities, I think the better off we are. It makes me wonder though, is there a good resource for exploring some of these details about hosts that support Drupal, or is it really just a matter of do your own research?
Hmm. It's a good question.
I guess.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't have any list of resources. I
Yeah.
do have a hosting guide on our website that's probably need to be made more prominent, but it kind of discusses.
John, I think you cut out. Just getting to the good part too.
Looks like John has a connect interruption.
Yeah, he was traveling.
I can interject a couple things. So I don't know specifically regards to ethical hosting, but there are definitely lists out there you can go to find out businesses that to look up their different their records in regards to their ethics. I can't think of the specific like websites at the moment, but there are definitely websites so you can look up the different ethics of different companies, and you might be able to find hosting providers along that. Definitely in regards to my opinion on the whole matter of your clients and making sure that you're doing what you can for in regards to their values. It's definitely informed consent.
Yeah.
Let them know what their options are, and if they think that if the cost is more of an issue versus ethics versus like reliability, all those different things. So if you can have a lot of options under your belt, definitely I think that helps to offer them.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on one of the most prevalent items, and I was actually intentionally holding off on this, which is costs. Because costs are not just a matter of what you pay per month. Cost is also a matter of what you pay for various features that come along with it, the maintenance costs of somebody going through and setting things up and then making changes as necessary. There are a lot of costs with maintaining a website beyond just the development of a Drupal site, for example, or the improvement of it. Just the hosting environment, the deployment environments, things like that are subject to change just over time. Uh, but I think in conjunction with cost, like if you're going to buy a new car, cost is going to be a factor. There's no doubt about it. But there may be certain features that you do or don't want. So if you live in the mountains, you probably want a car that can climb hills. And if you live really close to a city area, you probably don't want a really large car. You want something that's probably easier to park with great fuel efficiency. But there are different values that I think we have when making a purchase consideration or a subscription consideration, especially um, beyond just cost. Uh, but cost is a big one. So to your point, I think that's what typically will persuade folks to go with a DigitalOcean solution over Acquia if they're a smaller business and they don't really have that sort of a budget. Um, we talked about extra tools as well, especially for enterprise, that being a thing. I learned at least, and so this is anecdotal, don't quote me on this, but I did learn that the digital asset management system for Acquia, I think they said starts around $750,000 per year.
Hmm.
And as an open source developer, I personally can't really justify that beyond hell, I'll just build it myself or find some sort of other open source project that can do this. So when I look at companies like Acquia, I'm not seeing just a host. We can call them a solutions provider as a whole, which is fine. They have an audience, they have customers. It is their business, and that's their model. But if I'm, someone who is making technical recommendations to companies, I do want to be sensitive to those costs and that vendor lock-in and things of that sort of nature. So with that in mind, what are your thoughts about, hosting costs and other things that you would tell people who are trying to work on a website with you?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's usually what's the requirement for the websites. It depends, for example, if it's some kind Drupal commerce shop, and it needs, for this case, first of all, they have what the right word? Concurrency, when you have like concurrency, yeah? And in this case, it should be first of all, it should be DDoS attack defender protection. It's another way. For example, for this site, it's load balancer. For they have something on a sale. Yeah, they should have a manager. This is load balancer. And for example, if just simple hosting or it's your own hosting on a server on the table, it's pretty hard to implement. Yeah,
Like
for,
the logged in versus not logged in traffic.
yeah, for something simple one for the forum, yeah, it's really you have like a big variety of what you can pick up as a hosting. Yeah, for the smaller business, yeah, it's need consideration all the time.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Oh, well.
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
Of course.
I think my connection has switched again. Yeah, I was saying that we have a kind of a hosting guide written up on our website, and it's probably not the easiest to find, but I have sort of breaking out into the categories and the rough costs between the different types of hosting. And yeah, we just try and lay out some options and don't have a specific hosts in mind necessarily with that, just more the categories to help people make the right decisions and ask the right questions so they get something that'll work for them.
Oh, another one interesting requirement I forgot to mention. For example, back days in Ukraine, we have this is government regulation for the government websites. Hosting should be physically placed in the country. For example, we cannot, first of all, we cannot afford AWS hosting, for example, and another reason, this hosting should be placed into the country, at least, yeah.
There's a growing sensitivity for geographically located. I mean, there's certainly co-located servers a lot of times with the larger scale websites. But again, if you're smaller or if you're a local business, geographically located also makes sense from a performance standpoint. From
Yeah.
a security standpoint, if you're doing a government or government funded website, a lot of times they'll require data centers to be inside a country.
Yeah.
So let's dig in a little bit more to the costs. Maybe I'll come at this a little bit more from a different angle. If you have a personal website, where do you host your personal website? I'm assuming it's not Acquia or Pantheon.
Patreon has a free account, so something like this, yeah. Patreon and Maybe DigitalOcean, and before I used lots. This is Hessner web service. It's a European. I think it's in Germany.
Okay.
I used it a lot.
I do truly want to find a few because I'm trying to accrue more Canadian clients. I do want to try to find more Canadian businesses that are hosts. So that's one agenda that I have more long term. Anybody else? Small cheap
As I
hosts.
mentioned, we're kind of multi-cloud, so we have freelock.com is on a server and in Google Cloud. But we also have three main servers, one at AWS, one at Google, and one at DigitalOcean, where we do most of the hosting of all of our smaller clients. And the main thing we charge for is we don't charge much for the hosting, but we charge for the maintenance, and we require maintenance if they're going to be working with us. So, so all in, that ends up being in the $400 a month range is what we're charging, which we've been able to save people, money coming from Acquia and some of the larger Pantheon accounts. But yeah, for small places, it's definitely still out of reach.
Mhm.
Right on. Chris, Tara.
I still need to kind of set up my personal website. So I have had different experiences with different options for hosting, specifically when I was doing like more freelance. And definitely, if there was like a local business that did hosting, it did definitely help for being able to go into their offices and like ask questions if you had any issues with like their website that you couldn't figure out online. I was kind of curious if anyone had any experience with like GoDaddy as far as an affordable option, because I remember that at one point before my dad looked into other options, for a while I was running his website and maintaining it, and making any updates to it, and he was using GoDaddy, and I found out later that you can, under certain packages, have Drupal added to your GoDaddy package. So I
You
was
can
curious if
install
anyone
on
had.
Yeah, you can install on GoDaddy. The problem is the database servers tend to not be tuned well for it, so they end up being super slow. They end up being really most of the shared hosting. That's kind of the biggest issue. You can certainly do it, and it'll certainly run. I like using Git for managing all the code, and a lot of hosts. Well, I haven't checked recently, but that used to be a problem where they wouldn't use SSH or SFTP. You had to use FTP, which should have been shot and killed in the 90s. I don't know why it's still a thing for hosting because it's completely insecure and incredibly slow compared to using rsync and SSH and Git to deploy, which you can deploy in seconds as opposed to hours. But yeah, you can get it running on anything that has PHP and a database.
Yeah, that's crazy about the FTP though, because when I was learning, definitely learning HTML, SSH was like the definite go-to. So that's crazy. That's still a thing. But anyway, go on. Someone else was about to talk.
I used GoDaddy. I want to say maybe 15 years ago. So I can't imagine it's the same anymore. But some of what John was saying in terms of difficulties with just even doing deployments or anything like that. And this is at the beginning of like when Git was even being considered for Drupal. That was back when Drupal was still on, I think it was CVS or something like that. But the idea of just doing direct edits on a server was still so prevalent back then that, again, just such a different world. The word deployment was more a matter of, did you just copy the files? Outside of that, I guess GoDaddy is one of those things that always kind of is a thorn in a lot of IT people's side, because not just the technical challenges that you might face, but also because a lot of times they have very predatory marketing strategies, lots of upsell and things of that nature. So I think that's the bad taste in a lot of our mouths when you've had your experience with those. I don't know if that's changed, mostly because I think once you have abandonment at that level, it's hard to really win somebody back. Um, but back when that was the case, that was a big concern. But I think you say GoDaddy, and I think we can say there are very similar sorts of name registrar slash host slash whatever sort of companies that may be a suitable option for running a Drupal site. I think it really comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is the cost versus features versus security versus, how much effort you have to put into it just to even get it to work on a regular basis. Is your cost per month getting offset by that amount of effort? And if you're charging by the hour, which, if you're freelance, you definitely should be, that can be a real big concern. I'm not sure where to go from here. What other hosting related things do you folks really want to talk about? What sort of challenges do you face?
Well, with Azure, there was an issue with a load balancer causing a long delay on each request or on many requests, and that took a while to find the cause because I didn't have direct access to the server. So, through the because people who did have direct access weren't keen on speaking to Microsoft, and also because Microsoft didn't provide much information. It took took some time to resolve that.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, which is if you have a technology stack, being aware of how it does or doesn't work well together with the solutions you have. So if you're trying to put Drupal on something, like I can't tell you how many clients over the past decade wanted to put Drupal on IIS, for example, because they're sworn to using IIS. They don't want to use Apache. They don't want to use Nginx. They want to use IIS. And it is technically possible. They want to use Microsoft SQL Server. It is technically possible, but it's not advisable.
No, this was Apache, and this
Sure.
was Postgres SQL. So it wasn't the only Microsoft technology was the hosting and whatever load balancer. I don't know anything about the load balancer, but I wrote a little PHP file to prove that it wasn't Drupal.
Interesting. It's these fun little hacks to get around technical challenges that are really interesting. Like caching layers alone are a lot to navigate, making sure that things like authenticated traffic and IP detection and things like that work, especially when you have things like load balancers. That was, and I'm sure still is, a tough thing to navigate, depending on how your stack is composed.
Yeah, more often than not, we've been ripping out load balancers because very few sites need them, and it adds so much complexity to to everything, and they get faster response times and less downtime because there's less things to go wrong. If you don't need a load balancer, I really think they're overkill. We work on like disaster recovery instead, just because to do that effectively is super expensive. We had a story similar to what you were just saying, Chris, there. We had a client that had a server at DigitalOcean, but they were using a hosted database service called ScaleGrid. And both of them were in the Bay Area data centers. They're supposed to be right next to each other. And then one day, all of a sudden, their site started timing out. It was just super slow. And I got on there and found that the traffic was actually routing from San Francisco to Los Angeles and back again between Drupal and the database. And so I was able to kind of point them to the issue, and they didn't believe me for like a month. And finally they switched it and the site instantly went fast again.
Some
Like,
kind of loop. Yeah, it was like a loop.
yeah, yeah. They said, "Oh, this is the bay." Yeah, it was some routing issue between DigitalOcean and ScaleGrid or something. And yeah, we got them to move the database server, and things sped right back up again.
That's
So,
what tests are
um,
good at.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing about with all of this stuff, it takes some time to, like I wouldn't just send a customer to DigitalOcean if we weren't there to help them manage it, because you got to know a lot to run a server. A shared host, I think, is a better option, but it's a much worse for hosting. So, if they can at all manage it, I totally recommend having something that it will run Drupal well, and that is not a basic shared host.
Oh, for sure. I've used things like DigitalOcean, and for that DreamHost, I've used Linode. It's a chore just to keep everything up to date, but I do it more as a hobby, not something that I would advise for a client. Um, which I guess was the spirit of our meetup topic is how are we helping companies make better Drupal hosting choices?
Mhm. Yeah. Back days definitely was simpler. We have Drupal 7, we have Nginx, and we have Apache as a proxy server, and that is CCH connection, Drush, AppDB, and yeah.
Well, with the
Today.
auto updates coming out, I wonder if that some of those issues around shared hosting, if you can put it on a shared host that can actually run Composer to make the auto updates work,
Well,
that may become a more viable option.
yeah, those auto updates are a security risk because you'd have to let the web server write to the PHP files.
Yep.
So that's not good. And, I don't
Yeah.
know why they're going backwards. I mean, that's what the HC access files in Drupal are for to prevent PHP execution. And here they are letting, the web server execute files or write files that can be executed. So that's not a good situation.
Yeah, I've
Yeah, I
long wondered
100%
about that.
agree. 100% agree with you on that. It's just the rest of the market is going WordPress, and this is one of
Well,
and
but I have a solution for that. It's
What
I'm,
the
I'm putting it into the chat.
ah
Ah, jeez.
yeah, I mean, I think yeah, that's one of those things where I mean, we see a lot more hacked WordPress sites than we do hacked Drupal sites, and I think that's one.
Okay, so my solution is in the chat. So it's a Java application that runs on the desktop, and it's basically just a wrapper around Composer. So you just enter your SSH credentials, and it logs into your server as you, not as the web server, and then it runs Composer commands like to update, the Composer update and to install modules. And that's a lot safer than automatic updates.
Yeah,
mhm.
I've long wondered about how automatic updates would be safe to run, and I would argue that if you're we keep running into the government, but also things like hospitals, schools, anything with a security sensitivity, you
Oh,
probably won't want to run it at all. You'll want to go through a deployment workflow to test, is that update going to break something?
what do you think of a hospital site that's still running Drupal 7?
It shouldn't. I mean, that's what I think.
Well, U of
But
M,
they are.
U of M Health.org is.
Yeah, this is a very prevalent thing, but I think what ends up happening for a lot of folks who are running Drupal 7 is either they don't have the funding to do anything about it, or thanks, John. Or if they do have the funding to do something about it, they're considering, am I going to go to Drupal 11, or am I going to go to a different platform? And that ends up being a lot of the debate folks are facing right now with Drupal 7 sites I see.
Mhm.
Or definitely the option of backdrop if they can't do Drupal 11 for whatever reason.
Yeah. I still
So,
support a couple websites on a Drupal 7, and I try to push it to migrate to Drupal 10. Yeah. Still cannot afford.
I put a government adjacent site in the chat that seems to still be on Drupal 9. And when I called them to offer to do the update for a small fee, they hung up on me. So I turned them into the report a vulnerability line, and it's still on Drupal 9 about a week later. So, there are a lot of irresponsible people out there. So, the generator value in the source code might be wrong. So, it could actually be on Drupal 10, but I would say it's most likely still on 9.
Yeah, security issues. But I think that a lot of folks will have a really preconceived notion that once you build a a website, not just a Drupal site, a website, you've made your investment, it's there, the information's there, it'll just work. At some point, you may want to switch to a different platform, but your job is now done. And I try to empty that idea from people's brains and say, you don't just, if you're a company, you don't have a marketing expense one time. It's an ongoing budgetary consideration, and your technology is no different. It doesn't mean that you have to pour tons of money into it, but you should just at least be aware of what its needs are and what your needs are over that period of time. So security is, of course, the most ideal, but security is basically just upholding what is the purpose of the website, and how does that achieve our organization's goals and the needs of our audience. Security is more of just a byproduct of making sure that's all done safe. It's surprising how much security takes a back seat just because people can't estimate what that will look like. Like, can you tell me how much you're going to spend on security in the next year? But I know you should have a budget for it. So I think it's that reality that a lot of folks, especially in leadership positions, have difficulty navigating because it's the, I'd rather just deal with the fallout. And this is why we have situations where, data is taken for hostage and then you have ransom, and then you have, schools or police departments that have to fork out taxpayer money to basically recoup what they already had or make things more secure.
Yeah, it's another issue to explain customers how they, for example, usually people, how it's work. If somebody order site or some web application from you, you finish it, and another it's like a support and maintain. And it's pretty hard to explain people that you should, it's an ongoing process all time. You should update this is modules. You should be aware about security, etc. It's a separate conversation, and in this case, you should be like developer, then project manager, and also have a good experience to talk with the people and convey your thoughts to the people.
Yeah, it's it makes you feel like Chicken Little or the boy who cried wolf. You're made to appear to be a fear monger, someone who is trying to get somebody to react based on fear. And there's a kernel of truth in that, but it's not for the sake of fear. It's for the sake of preventing harm. So, going around and saying should behave a certain way so you don't die or so your business doesn't collapse, I think is still a valuable public service, if you will. But that's the coping of people who are especially decision makers in organizations where they don't have the coping skills to be able to deal with that because maybe they don't have the budget, maybe they don't have the understanding of the problem and the gravity of the consequences of their decision, and trying to bring that to folks like, hey, you're on Drupal 9, you shouldn't be. You're on Drupal 7, you really shouldn't be. Here are the consequences. Depending on how that message is delivered or who it's delivered to, it can just feel like a sales pitch. And you're talking about individuals who day in and day out are getting sales pitches, and there's a lot of noise for them. So I find this is just my experience. First, try to find the right person to try to talk to before you even have that conversation. Because if we come in saying, hey, your site's insecure, it may fall on deaf ears. But also have like a gentle sort of empathetic approach to understand what their world is like and how we might be perceived by them. Like, hey, I'm coming at you with yet another problem to solve that you may look at me and be like, I can't afford you. I can't do anything about this. And you may say, if you don't do anything, here are the consequences. It will be more expensive later if you have to fix that problem. Or you may lose your job because of that. I think that those are valid points, and there's a gentle way of delivering that message.
Use a different layer of fear, right? You can, it can
Thanks,
be
Chris.
expensive. Next layer, you can lose your job. Yeah. Oh, another pressure.
I mean, it's
point,
it's a personal fear. It's a organization that you work for fear. Fear can create a sense of urgency, and I think that's why it's used as a tool so much, because to sell or to compel somebody, you have to typically give them a sense of urgency. Like, well, if you don't buy this car today, it will be $10,000 more expensive tomorrow. Well, you just created an instant sense of urgency. It creates a spark of fear, like, oh shoot, I won't have that ability later, so I have to act now. But when the world around us is designed to do that to you on a constant basis, you get this fatigue from constantly being bombarded with fear and other things that demand your attention and urgency. So I think our job as technologists is to just approach issues like that in a calm manner and be prepared for the rejection that will occur time after time, and just be that message of good hope. There are, I think we all know this, there are bounty programs for finding security vulnerabilities in large scale things. You go to Google, you say, hey, I could exploit this right now and do harm. I'm letting you know so you can fix the problem. Those are maturity levels. And the same is true of things outside of security. So if I do a lot of content strategy. So if I'm talking to somebody about how they should present their information in a certain way, depending on their level of maturity, that may be falling on deaf ears. Or I may be talking to a very mature university client who has a department with really clean publication workflows, and they understand what I'm talking about, and they'll actually adopt those good changes. So really reading the audience and understanding where their maturity level is gives you an understanding of how to talk to them and kind of meet them at their level, because it's sort of like the grade level improvement. If you're a D student, you don't become an A student overnight. You might become a C student. That's it. One grade level at a time. So we got to find out what grade level they are when it comes to security and technology, and kind of just meet them where they are. Use gentle, clear language, and just let them know what you can do to help them, and then just back off. So you're no longer the used car salesman in their face.
Yeah, definitely. But it's like another level of experience because, for example, we have one a level of experience as a developer and another level of experience it's a convey your thoughts and convey your experience to the people your clients, and yeah, it's sometimes it's more complicated than just develop than just coding. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'll do sometimes is actually ask qualifying questions instead of telling people what they should do. Most people don't like being told what to do. They don't like being told how to spend money either, especially if it's not their money and they need to get other people involved to convince them to spend that money. It may make them look bad because they're spending money they didn't expect to have to spend. So instead, it's more value-based questions like, so I'm just curious. I'm just a concerned citizen. I'm a technologist, and I've made some observations, but I don't know where you are with things. Maybe you're already working on a project related to your website, and if so, that's absolutely wonderful, and I'm glad that you're there, and we don't really have much else to talk about. But I've at least observed this concern. Would it be bad if somebody hacked into your website and, I don't know, locked you out or took your data or put information on there that was false? Would that be bad, or do you have a plan to deal with that? So I feel like the way that we craft our language can make a big impact on how people may perceive our role in that conversation, or that we are trying to be helpful, because you're asking a question,
Yeah.
being willing to be wrong about some of your assumptions.
But yeah, I feel you have like a big experience because in this case, need this is like this is example just like pop up in your mind, right?
Yeah.
It's and I feel you like have a big experience. You don't need something reinvent. You just
Yeah.
based on your experience. Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually reminds me, Experience Builder, I think, if I recall correctly, not to get too far off topic, but Experience Builder is supposed to have a beta release in a little less than a month, if I'm not mistaken. And the goal of the beta, if I do recall correctly, was to make it feature stable. So in other words, if you get to the main release and you start building a website using this beta, it shouldn't have tons of breaking consequences.
Experience builder. What is this? It's
So you know what Layout Builder is?
yeah.
It's like the next evolution on top of Layout Builder,
Oh.
where it's an admin interface for things like landing pages, stuff like that.
Uh-huh. Okay, nice.
So, well, the reason I bring this up is I have a Drupal website that I have not upgraded. Admittedly, it's my personal website. I have backups of it. I'm personally not concerned about it, and I think that's an important distinction. Is sometimes we have our own projects. Doctors make the worst patients. Well, I'm not worried about maintaining my website because I'm just going to replace it with a Drupal 11 site. The thing that I've been holding off on is Experience Builder. But I got an alert yesterday saying my website was down.
Oh.
So I logged into it. Of course, I always see, crawlers and stuff trying to look for vulnerabilities. I expect that. And I try to make some security updates and the whole site goes down again. So just navigating all this, it's because I had the wrong version of PHP. I have an old version of Linux and all these other issues. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep my backups. If the site goes down over the next month, I don't really care. And then when Experience Builder comes up, I'm off to the races building a Drupal 11 site to replace it. But I think that's the attitude that we're going to face a lot of times when it comes to not only people's sensitivities to security updates and the like, but also when they are faced with that situation, are they going to also have to make a decision about their hosting environment? Like right now I'm using, I think it's Ubuntu 18, which is a little bit old. So I think having those sort of ideas in mind? Like, what are you operating on? Not just version of Drupal, but what's your server on? Do we need to consider updating the server as well? If we're going to be updating that, is your host serving you well? Should we look at alternative hosts to maybe satisfy the needs of other updates that you might be doing or other goals you have?
You just mentioned about this is Ubuntu. I have one site. It's like it's this site don't have access through the internet. It's intranet. Yeah, it's called
Yeah.
the intranet. Yeah, and it's still running on a Drupal 6 and PHP 5.6. And MySQL last time, MySQL database was around only one table, about 8 gigabyte, and I should cut the database. Yeah,
Uh,
it's and they still consider options like upgrade to not upgrade. I think yeah, in this case it's not just upgrade because last year I had conversation with them and they asked me about can we migrate to Drupal 10, 11. I told him no, just create new one website because they have a lot of legacy stuff, etc. Just create new one and we can just use direct SQL request and extract data and send to Drupal 10 or 11 and that's
yeah.
it. Yeah. And yeah, why they use this Drupal 6? This is a website for the bakery and they have accounting system based on Drupal 6. Yeah. And
Oh, okay.
I still support it, but at the moment it's, I don't know, just clear cache and switch my sum to InnoDB and that's it.
Yeah, I was that was right when I started my Drupal career is when Drupal 6 came out. And I was also there in New Orleans when they had the second line. It was a death march for when Drupal 6 hit end of life. But yeah, I've run into a few clients that are still on Drupal 6 sites. There's one, the PHSA had a website on Drupal 6, and we were
Oh.
in the process of trying to replace it, but then they just said, "Okay, we're not going to go forward with this." We were almost done building the site. They're not going to finish this.
I know this. It's I forgot. One moment. Let me recall it. It's poison site. Yeah,
Yep, that's the one.
poison site. Yeah, yeah. I will be like next who going to work on this. It's a next iteration.
I mean, it was a pretty basic site. They used the book module quite a bit, which was an interesting conversation, and that actually spawned off an episode of Talking Drupal that I was on to talk about the
Mhm.
book module. Like, should it still exist? What does it do? um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I think when people are married to the solutions that they're so familiar with, and this is all of us. Like, if you are used to your car that you have right now and then you buy a new car, it's all new buttons and gadgets and stuff, and you have a learning curve where you have to like get familiar with it again before you're comfortable again. Websites are no different, and I think that we have to be really gentle with the folks who this website serves, both their audience and the people who maintain it especially, and make sure that we're just meeting them where they are and say, look, this is going to be a process. It's going to be frustrating at times for everybody involved, but understand we're here to support you through that process to bring you to something better. And
Mhm.
you have to help us get there because you have to tell us what it needs to do. And it can't do everything. So you have to help us focus on the things that it really needs to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And in terms of PHSA, it's some kind, I think it's a problem for big organization.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of policy. For example, you work with the people who has this is intention to change something, and this intention so strong, and he ready to do this one, improve that one, but the policy. We have a lot of policy, not only we, I mean, I think a big organization, and sometimes you just stop and struggle in this policy and you cannot move because you need like a high level approval, and while it's go down, you're already boring and forgot about this project.
Yeah.
Another good talk.
Yeah. Well, I did still enjoy working with that group. Um, they were very soft spoken and polite and very easygoing. So hopefully they can get something stood up to replace that site soon.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if we don't have too much more to talk about, I might cut it early. Were there any other things, Andre or Tara, that you wanted to talk about in terms of Drupal hosting or anything else Drupal?
Tara.
I had a couple things, but you can go ahead. And Andre or I don't know how you pronounce it.
Andrew. It's simple.
Andrew.
Yeah. No. I just mentioned that I see you switch on your microphone, and I just decided to highlight.
Sounds good. Yeah. Definitely think sometimes you have to approach it from not like a fear mongering kind of standpoint, but more of like, just like ask people like, do you want just an upgrade? Do you want something like, are you interested in like, how do you feel about your current site, for instance? Is it the level that you wanted at, for instance?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Instead of being from a standpoint of oh, this is some like horrible future situation they could have because you're not dealing with the security issues. It can be just like, how can we just how can we work on improvement instead of and the security and all the other things can be along with that. Definitely I have a potential client that I am needing to do some more contact with, that she told me basically, yeah, my site, I asked them like, would you like an upgrade or your website? And she was just saying, yeah, my website is like totally defunct. Don't even bother looking at it. I've been considering doing an upgrade for a while, but I just been putting it off.
Most people do, yeah.
And also one other thing I had thought about asking about was just your guys' plans with the upcoming in October, the Pacific Northwest Drupal camp. Are you planning on attending? Have you figured out like transportation and stuff to the location? And
Yeah, I'm debating it. If I did, I doubt I would drive. I mean, I'm close enough that I could technically do that, but I would probably fly if I did. The location of the summit is 15 minutes from the airport, so you can get a ride share or something from the
That's
airport
in
to it.
Portland, what you mentioned before.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm on the fence, and the main reason I'm on the fence is going across the border into the United States.
okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen. That shouldn't be a problem, but I have to think about the logistics of that. I mean, if I go into Vancouver, I don't have to think about that at all. I can just go. But if I have to go across the border, I would probably bring a burner phone and use a vanilla laptop without any personal information on it, just because I don't want people at the border prying.
Even this one, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I'm more worried about U.S. border control. It's less about um, there's always this like notion of like, oh, if you don't have anything to hide, then it shouldn't matter. Well, it does matter. It's an intrusion of personal privacy, and I find that to be a degree of personal freedom. I don't want somebody going through my social media feeds. I don't want people going through my private files, but it's also an invasion of my business. So if I have clients that have, very sensitive information for the projects that I'm working on, I don't want the U.S. government to have access to that because that company hasn't given them permission to do that. So it is a concern from my standpoint. I don't think they would have any issue with my information, but it's the hassle. And I've heard enough horror stories of people who cross the border in the past year, or not past year, past few months.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
I'm debating
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Don't bring definitely don't bring anything that anyone would want to be like bug you with TSA or
Yeah.
or
But if I go, I'd probably submit a session. So I'm a little bit on the fence about that right now. If I submit a session, I'm committing to going.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
well, you could
Yeah.
also ask about a virtual session if necessary, like a Zoom one.
Maybe there. I helped somebody do one of those last year when I helped out with the video recordings and stuff like that in Seattle, and it worked. But I'm not sure if I would have a bunch of people in a room watching me talk on a screen for a presentation. So I debate it. I know they don't have any plans to do virtual for the summit, so I'm not sure if I want to request an exception right now.
Um, yeah, I guess it's a few more months, but I would say definitely don't be afraid to bring it up later because we've already kind of talked about how we're kind of worried about how different international Drupalers are going to deal with any of the future conferences, for instance.
Yeah, I was very interested in looking at Japan in November, though.
Oh, it should be awesome one.
If I can get some more work before then I can afford that trip. But that's time and money, an expensive trip.
Yeah. Tara,
But
are you going to this session?
mhm.
I'm just asking Tara. Tara, are you going to this session in I forgot this city, Peters, what the city?
Are you referring to the summit or DrupalCon or something
Yeah, for
else?
this summer. You mentioned it today, yeah? This
Yeah,
is
Pacific, the one I was mentioning was Pacific Northwest Drupal Camp.
yeah.
I
Are you
think it's
going
going to
to?
be a little bit outside Portland, Oregon.
Yeah,
no.
are you going to this session?
I'm going to try. It's definitely always a little bit complicated going from Alaska in a remote town where I have to fly out of Anchorage every single time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's several miles to Anchorage. I wish they had more options for airports that connected to directly Juneau or something like that. There's maybe a new flight service based off the Kenai, but I don't know if it's specifically for Kenai Peninsula, the peninsula I'm on, but I don't know if it's directly for the town I'm based in. But I am considering it because it is because my main cost this time around might be just getting to Anchorage, and I might be able to use my miles, my Alaska airline miles, and then maybe it might be if I'm able to get one of the dorm the smaller rooms at this conference. It might be one of the more affordable options for accommodations too. So I'm
Oh,
definitely looking into it.
okay, good.
Yeah. And I guess I was bringing up seeing if any of you guys are planning on going because I was looking at like options for like carpooling kind of from the airport.
Oh yeah,
Or
yeah.
if
I
I
see what
take
you mean.
like a shuttle or whatever. Something like that, or shuttle or taxi or something like that. Or
I mean,
are there any like train or bus going there? Or
there might be a bus. I'm not sure if there's a train. Yeah, I don't know.
Mhm.
Amtrak Cascades. Yeah. About 8 hours
Okay.
and 20 minutes. 110 bucks.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, I think that's possible. I'd
All right.
consider that.
Excuse me. Well, if none of the if Freelock, who I kind of am working for the moment, if they're not like trying to do some kind of carpool or whatever together, I might look into that then.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah, that was the other reason I was considering going, because Freelock was willing to maybe pay for my ticket at least to the camp.
Yeah. You should do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
close.
try. I'm gonna try. Like I said, I have one big expense, and it's getting out of town, and I'm gonna see if it's gonna be affordable to get out of town to Anchorage.
Well, there's usually about any given year, there's about maybe 75 people that go. And they are from all over Pac Northwest and some parts beyond. Like we have some folks from California, of course. We'll have some people from across the country. Like Nora, for example, came. She's in Chicago. I think some folks from Colorado. So yeah, you'll get a good smattering.
Okay. I guess Andrew Morton. I don't know if I think he's sometimes gone to the Pacific Virtual Meetup. He's also one of the main developers at Freelock. He was saying he wanted to go, and he was asking me to check on like if they still had rooms, for instance. So I think he's definitely considering it.
And I think there's also some affordable hotels nearby too. If you wanted to take a look, I think there's like a Holiday Inn or a Days Inn or something like that. So yeah, I would take a look at both of those options.
Okay.
I don't think.
Alrighty.
Yeah,
Other than that, I will definitely be keeping an eye on Slack if people want to figure more of that stuff out later.
Yeah, if you aren't in the Slack channel, there's a PNW-Drupal-Summit channel.
Okay.
I'll put the link in. Copy link. I'll put the link in the chat here so you can easily find it. If you aren't already a part of the Drupal Slack, then you'll have to join that first. But yeah, it's the PNW-Drupal-Summit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But yeah, if you have any questions or if you want to collaborate with any folks, there's 63 people on that channel. That's also where we talk about organizing it and whatnot. So I'm helping out with session selection. Ryan Price, he lives in Portland. He can probably tell you anything about the area.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of good folks.
I know I've been to Portland, but it's been a while. Not since like college days.
Yeah, it's a good town.
Yeah. My dad's side of the family, they're based out of Oregon. And my grandmother used to have a architectural firm. That was her firm that was based out of Portland. Margie Largent. You may or may not have heard of her.
No, I'm not sure if I know.
As far as architecture goes, I guess she's kind of big in the history of Oregon architecture specifically, at least.
Yeah,
but if you're not into architecture, yeah. But if you're not as much into architecture, you might not have heard of her.
Yeah, I am, but not that much.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay, yeah, let's wrap up. What do you think? Because as I understood, already spaghetti cold enough.
Yeah, it's about that time.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's down to just us three. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have topics for next time we do a meetup. It will be July, so I don't expect there to be too many people interested. If we don't get enough interest, then I may just cancel it. It just depends. But I'll take a look at the topic list and see if folks are going to be around. If so, then we'll do one. If not, then I'll punt on it.
Yeah, can I suggest one theme for one topic for discussion?
Yeah,
It's about I don't know, some kind how run business on a Drupal, some kind of entrepreneur on a Drupal, something like this.
So running a business on Drupal, how do you make
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I think it would be interesting, and I noticed we have a lot of people as work as a freelancer, and I think they can share their experience.
Oh, I see what you mean. So in other words, I provide Drupal services and I want to help other people also understand how I run my business, that sort of thing.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it from both probably a organization, also a freelance perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll put that in the list. And we still have a few topics from last time, so we can put it all in the mix and see what folks are interested in.
I guess I would also suggest as experience builder comes up, that definitely being a topic in regards to if people are using it, what's their experience, their current experience, is it working well for them? Would they recommend it to other people for whatever reason?
Okay.
As well as maybe a little quick discussion on if people are submitting sessions or plans submitting sessions for Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, for instance. And if they want to talk about that, if they want to do like a July or August or September or whatever test talk to
Well, our next meetup would be scheduled for July 2nd.
yeah.
And the session submissions are due on the 11th. So it may work, but it may also be a tight squeeze.
Well,
but it could just be a talk about session submissions as a whole.
Yeah, just session submissions if people want to test it out on people to get a little more feedback, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we can do that. Oh, we did something similar, I think, when we talked to about DrupalCon, but that's a bit more of a specialized thing. Well, cool. If you have other ideas, definitely drop them in the Slack channel, and we'll put them in the list. I will share the recording from our call today after it's done converting and all the notes. And with that, I'll see you next time, I hope.
Okay, thank you. It was a great session.
Yeah.
Thanks
for contributing.
Good. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.